Hi. It always, sorry about this. I'm always just wanting to see who live viewers are, and for some reason my finger just doesn't do the trick sometimes. So sorry about this shaking and instability in the camera. Happy Wednesday. Um, I mentioned a phenomenon in my blog this week. For those of you who don't know, I have a blog. Hey Ron, how are ya? And it's at epicquerying.com/blog, or I share the blog here on this page every Thursday. And this week I covered a topic called dispositional greed. It was really just kind of something that fell into a list of other things that I wanted to talk about. And what dispositional greed is a tendency that has been scientifically observed to get greedy, get a little overambitious. As you get a taste of ambition and achievement, it turns on the motivational drives of your brain, and then it drives you towards getting more and more. And when that makes decisions for leaders, it can become problematic, as you might imagine. So even somebody that might have started out as somebody who had the highest good of all people top of mind, sometimes if they rise in rank or responsibility, authority, so on and so forth, they might start to shift what is motivating them towards more power, authority, credibility, money, influence, and make that what becomes most important. Now, the awareness of this is key, just like anything else. So, a lot of leaders might rise in the ranks and realize that they've earned that position. They achieved and they got to that position, and so they must be a good leader. I think what started me thinking about this is because so many people complain about their bosses. And it's the number one reason why people leave their job. It's also a reason why people stay in their job. If they have a good boss and they know that even if they don't like what they do, they don't know if they're going to find a good boss like that somewhere else. So some people stay in bad jobs for good bosses. And many people leave good jobs for bad bosses. And it's like, how can these bosses not know they're bad, right? And they might have been good bosses at some time, but this is a phenomenon that can happen. So if you've had a good boss and suddenly you're realizing that your boss gets promoted and suddenly they're making decisions that don't seem to be from the same good place that they made decisions before, then this is probably what's going on. How can you as an employee make your boss aware of that? Yeah, you probably can't. But you can, drop a hint that, maybe there's a consultant that come in. If there's evidence. There's usually symptoms, right? So if you have a bad boss and they're making these decisions, then symptoms will start to occur. Teams will start to get disengaged. There'll be greater conflict. There'll be less productivity. And those are the things that will drive a boss to want to seek out solutions, such as a consultant like me. So if those are the things that you're noticing, then, say, hey, why don't we have somebody come in and do an assessment? So, it's very innocent. It's all very innocent. And a good coach like me and a consultant will, sort through all the symptoms and try to help them understand what's going on in a way that isn't threatening and that is non-judgmental. Because ultimately what I want is for leaders to be better leaders and for people to be able to stay in jobs that they love because they also have a good boss, and for there to be a lot more bosses so that people also don't have to stay in bad jobs just because there are so few good bosses around. That's what I'm up to in the world. So it's a shift. It's a shift that can happen from going from being motivated by the social good, things that are good for everybody, and greater life satisfaction, wanting to be a certain kind of moral, ethical type of person. I'm not saying that people who are experiencing dispositional greed will be unethical or immoral, but the line gets a lot fuzzier. And if you're not aware that this is operating, then you would be able to potentially justify a means or even an end. And that's where bad things happen. It's kind of like, how did these people in these positions of power screw things up so badly, like with the crisis in 2008. So, if we boil it down to root cause, probably this. So the more we understand about the phenomenon that is dispositional greed, the more that we can make our leaders aware and help them. That awareness is key, helping them, once they have that awareness, understand how to temper it, because greed is responsible for a lot of great achievement in the world. And so, greed as a thing is not necessarily bad unless you are making other people suffer for your own gain. And when that happens, when a leader does start to make decisions that are self-serving, then what happens in the minds of the team is something called altruistic punishment. Another scientifically observed phenomenon that happens in the brain, in the centers of your brain, that evaluate morality and moral situations. It will realize that something unfair is being done, and it will want to punish the offender by being disengaged, by wasting time at work, by, flat out sabotage. Okay, so not that all of that is flat out sabotage, but that's the extreme it can get to. And so, so being fair is a good quality of a leader, but a leader may not realize when they're being unfair. And if they're really drunk on their own, ego and power and authority, then they might create a situation and a culture where receiving feedback on that isn't the place for it. It's inhibited, it's discouraged, and it may not be a conscious thing that they're doing. So there's a lot of unconscious things that leaders can do, or even become or do over time, shifts that can happen as they become more responsible for things, that can lead to decisions that usually bite them in the butt eventually, but unfortunately after lots of losses, lots of pain, trauma even. I'm not trying to be a sensationalist here, but a lot of people that I've talked to have PTSD from bad working situations. Okay, it can get that bad. If day in and day out, you're in a situation where you don't feel like you can give your boss feedback and they're not being fair, and you're not really sure how you're going to suffer because of it, or how the team's going to suffer, or how your clients are going to suffer, and ultimately how your family might suffer, that's no way to live day to day, A lot of people go to work with a pit in their stomach, literally feeling physically ill. Symptoms. You can manifest illnesses this way. Physiologically, just think about the stress that you're putting on your body. And if your body is managing the stress all the time, what good of a job is it doing of fighting illnesses off? It's not, so just think of it that way. But even just how powerful our subconscious mind is sometimes, if we don't feel like going into work because of a bad situation that we're going into work into, then we can turn that stomach ache into full out, viral vomit. So that's another symptom that a bad leader might experience. Frequent sicknesses of their team members, disengagement, lack of productivity, lack of communication, flat out making mistakes that seem like they could even be intentional. These are signs that, and I hesitate to use the word bad boss, because I feel like every bad boss has the potential to be a good boss, and I don't want to label a person like bad boss, like bad apple will always be a bad apple, because I personally believe that there's always a way to grow and expand and develop and raise your wellness. I've seen miracles in terms of people changing completely, how they respond to the world and how they see themselves in it. So, so I believe that there's potential for any bad bosses to be coached into being a much better boss. And some things can be instant, and some things can take very little time to develop. So if you have a bad boss, and you can take a look around at the things that this bad boss might be experiencing as symptoms of their bad bossness, then why don't you drop the hint that, maybe a consultant could come in and take a look and figure out what's really at work, what's going on, and then, give me a little in there so I can come in, especially if you love your job and you don't want to leave it, but your boss is bad. It's like a shame. I just hear that way too often. And companies lose great talent. And with that talent goes more talent, usually right behind them. And with that talent also goes knowledge capital. Morale goes down. More sicknesses, more illness, more work falls on everybody who's left. It's just it's an abyss of bad things that can come from bad bosses that can be prevented. The damage can be controlled. The bleeding can be sutured. So let me know if you've had a situation where you've had a bad boss or you had a good boss turn bad. I even had a teacher one time. I had her in 6th grade for French, and she was great. I loved her. She was like one of my favorite teachers. Then she came back in 8th grade, and she was just different. She had twins. I don't know if that had something to do with it. But, yeah, so that can happen. I mean, that happens also sometimes with, people who get tenure. You can experience that. So they'll be fully ambitious. They'll want to, go out there and mold young minds and do it in the highest good and be fully committed to developing other people into talented, knowledgeable, leaders of tomorrow, and then, fall off. That happens too. So, the good news is while greed is a driver of motivation, there are plenty of other good drivers of motivation, like wanting to be a good leader, like wanting to do social good, do